The hour of 10:30 having arrived, I'm going to call to order the Higher Education Finance and Policy Committee. We have do we have a quorum? We do. We have a quorum, so our vice chair has a couple of motions. Representative Wogemont.
Mr. Chair, my first motion has to do with the minutes of our meeting that we had on February 15th of 2024. I've had the opportunity to review those minutes, and I would like to move that our committee adopt them.
Representative Wogemont moves the committee minutes of February 15th, 2024. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Minutes are adopted. Representative Wogemont.
Mr. Chair, my second motion has to do with the minutes from our February 20th, 2024 meeting. I have also had the opportunity to review those minutes, and after reviewing them thoroughly, I would like to make a motion that we adopt those minutes.
Representative Wogemont moves the minutes of February 20th. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The minutes are adopted. Thank you, Representative Wogemont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for supporting my motions.
All right, members, today we are having the University of Minnesota. The first thing that we will have up is their supplemental budget request. So I think we're having President Ettinger is going to start, and if you look at your agenda, you can follow after him. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you so much, Chair Pawlowski. My name is Jeffrey Ettinger. I'm the interim president at the University of Minnesota. Really happy to be here today and have the chance to speak with you on behalf of the university. We will have a number of our regents here as well. Right now, Chair Janie Mayron is here, but this is also U of M Day. We're on the front steps. We brought the band, we brought Floyd, and we're still having a lot of activity there. So they'll file in during the course of the hearing. I'd like to provide you with a quick update of our search for the 18th full-time president of the University of Minnesota. Earlier this month, the Board of Regents selected 3 finalists for the position: Dr. Laura Bloomberg, Dr. Rebecca Cunningham, and Dr. James Holloway. For the past week and a half, each of these finalists have been going through the gauntlet of traveling to all 5 of our system campuses for public forums, followed by brief receptions. The Board of Regents will be interviewing the finalists in a public meeting next Monday. It is anticipated that the board will select a president-designate immediately following those public interviews in that same meeting on Monday, and I'll be eager to work with the president-designate over the coming months to ensure a smooth transition. I'm often asked in this role, especially coming from an outside position, not being part of the university, just kind of how are things going at the university? And I wanted to share a couple of comments with you on that. I think we continue to provide at the University of Minnesota a great learning experience for the 68,000 students. Our enrollment has remained steady over the last 10 years. We have seen some diminishment in terms of enrollment in our greater Minnesota campuses, and we've gained that back in the Twin Cities campus, but overall steady versus a national trend, which is down 15% over those same 10 years. We continue to have really high graduation rates. We had our all-time high rates for Duluth and Rochester last year. The Twin Cities campus has doubled their graduation rate in the last 20 years, and over 90% of our students get jobs or enter advanced education upon graduation. We are a major research institution, highly ranked by the Shanghai Rankings U.S. News and World Report. We have been able to generate over $1 billion in research funding in the last 3 years in a row. And more importantly, honestly, than the money are the incredible discoveries and impact that that research is having in the medical field, in biotech, in agriculture, you name it. We have outstanding outreach via our extension. We're in every county in Minnesota. We recently received the Carnegie Community Engagement Award for all 5 of our campuses. The University of Minnesota is the only system in the United States that has received that designation for all of its campuses. This last fall really was fun for me, my first fall in this role, to be part of the exciting university events. So a couple of those events were the prestigious Carlson and Stein lectures that featured Representatives Liz Cheney and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, both to packed houses. on our campus in Northrop Auditorium, and I think we're both excellent exercises of academic diversity and freedom. Our football team, after 2 9-win seasons in a row, had a little bit weaker year this year, but was invited to a bowl because of our academics. We had the strongest academic ranking of the remaining teams left, and indeed that academic priority is something that is common to all of our campuses. A couple of weeks ago, we really kind of had a big week with the most recent Regent meeting. The Governor's Task Force on Academic Health announced their recommendations. We were pleased to be able to announce progress in the Fairview negotiations and a new framework there, and the 3 presidential finalists were announced. And that's the first time in many, many years that we've been able to have multiple public finalists for the president job. So I think things are going very well, honestly, overall at the university. We are here today to ask for financial support in various specific areas, and so I did want to comment briefly, if I could, on financial stewardship. That was one of the priorities the board gave me in my interim role. I think they felt having an outside person with fresh eyes might be beneficial, and also we recognize that higher education is in challenging times when it comes to the financial side of the equation. I've learned that the university has tight financial reporting and control systems. They have a very detailed budgeting process that Julie Tonneson has explained to you in the past, and will again today. It's both kind of top down and bottom up. The university has a very strong credit rating. There's kind of a narrative maybe in the general public that, oh, higher education is suffering from runaway spending. When I look at the aggregate spending, total cost at the university over the last 10 years, the compound annual growth rate of those costs has been 2.9%. So I don't see that as a runaway number at all. I will acknowledge that the most recent year was 4.1% with a lot of the inflationary pressures. And as we work on our budget for this upcoming year, we really would like to get that number back down to that 3% level and not have that one year be more of an aberration. There also have been some kind of publicized articles from time to time about how many administrators we have, or are we changing the definition of administration? Again, to me, that total headcount is what's important. But as part of our budgetary goals for this session, we kind of do it in 2 parts. We are looking at holding that administrative headcount flat to be more consistent with the 68,000 student flat headcount that we're seeing in the total system. I also do want to acknowledge that as I mentioned earlier, some of the enrollment trends at our greater Minnesota campuses have created some financial challenges there. We have with us today University of Minnesota Morris Chancellor Janet Shrunk Erickson, and she will speak in a couple of minutes regarding our capital budget and supplemental requests. And with the chair's permission, I'll also ask her to briefly address the challenges she sees at the Morris campus and how they're addressing those as well. One of my top priorities as interim president has been to try to reinvigorate the university's partnership with the state and with the legislature. I'm very appreciative of the work of Melissa Lopez-Franzen and her team. Please feel free to call on any of them if you have any questions or requests. We acknowledge that the need for that strong partnership in order to be successful in our land grant mission. And we're hoping to secure support of this committee and the House for both our capital budget and supplemental budget requests before you today, understanding that you won't be in a position to take action at the very least until you see what the final estimates are. Our capital budget request, totaling $500 million, is entirely devoted to higher education asset preservation and replacement. It would allow for the renewal of more than 150 buildings to support education, research, and outreach across the state of Minnesota. This funding would address a large and unfortunately growing backlog of facility needs on all our campuses. We are also advancing a supplemental budget request, which includes $45 million in recurring operational funds. This would allow the university to keep costs lower for our students by minimizing tuition increases, as well as addressing a portion of expected cost increases. With the chair's indulgence, I would at this time like to invite our University of Minnesota Duluth student Julia Covert, and ultimately I'll also ask Chancellor Erickson to come up, but we'll just kind of do one at a time. So if that's okay, we'll have our student Julia Covert from our Duluth campus come up.
President Ettinger, I think Representative Rarick has a question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple quick questions before you handed it off.
Sure.
So I was actually in the Regent meeting on a Friday, and I don't recall exactly the day, but on that day, it was announced what the placement rate was. And you had said something about job placement plus going on to other education. And I remember very, very clearly that the number that was talked about, discussed, and on the screen at that moment was either 67 or 69% placement rate, which is very much lower than what you had said, 90-something%. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that, and I would just put that into perspective. So my daughter started at the U, at the Carlson School of Business. It wasn't for her. She went on to Dunwoody. Dunwoody, a little bit different than the U, but they have a 95% placement rate, where 67% is nowhere near 90-something%. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that. The other thing I would say is you had mentioned the employees, and I actually have the chart in front of me of how many employees at the University of Minnesota starting in the fall of 16 all the way through the fall of 23. And I would point out that it had a dip, but it has climbed to the highest number I've seen since 2016 to 27,675. Yeah, so 27,675. And when I looked at how many students you currently have, which is just a little over 68,000, it literally is 2.5 students supporting one employee. Now, I know some of them are part-time and so on, and it's just a whole range. But if you just look at the raw numbers, that's a pretty heavy load for 2.5 students to basically pay for one employee. The other thing I would point out that is of concern, before you get back to telling me your thoughts about the 67% placement rate, which is what they said at the Regent Board meeting. In the last biennium, or the first year of this biennium, I should say, we provided $125 million over base, and the total amount of the biennial appropriation was $1.38 billion, which is obviously historic. And still, we had a 3.5% increase in tuition. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, because $125 million was quite a bit, and the total of almost $1.4 billion is a significant amount of money to the University of Minnesota, and there still was a tuition increase of 3.5%. So I'm wondering if you could just help those two questions. The placement rate that actually is 67%, according to your experts that presented to the Regent Board, and then the big supplemental amount that you're asking for in consideration to the $125 million we've already given you.
President Ettinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Rarick. I'll need to get back to you then if those are obviously significantly different numbers if you're citing, if we mentioned one at a meeting that was 67% and now I'm talking about 90%. There could be a timing difference in terms of how long afterwards we're looking, but I'm not going to be able to just sort of pull that up from here. It's possible when Vice President Tonneson is here, and we will go into our budget in a little more detail, that she may have a little additional information on that. In terms of the supplemental request, it represents a little over a 3% increase in the state's portion of funding for the university. And ultimately, the university, the major funding sources are, we receive research funding. I referenced over $1 billion. Almost all that funding is specifically designated to a given area. Indeed, there's times when you have increases in research that the grants that you receive don't really cover all the administrative costs, so it actually adds to the budget of the university when we get more in research, but we're a major research institution, and clearly that's a priority for us. We receive a little over $300 million a year through donors. We're very grateful for that support. Some of that goes into capital areas to help assist with new buildings. A lot of it is related to student scholarships. They'll endow faculty chairs and so forth. But those are things that they're often designated to a specific purpose. We can't necessarily utilize them for the general budget, and we can't necessarily count on a given amount from that. So that leaves two other major sources of funding for operational increases, and if we're looking at a 3% increase in overall costs: tuition and the support from the state. And so we are looking at an increase of 3% last year's cycle in terms of the biennium. From the state, we received a little over a 3% increase for the first year of the biennium, but for the moment we've received nothing for the second year. That's part of our request here today. We're hopeful that we can get that same 3%. And yes, indeed, on the Twin Cities campus last year, we ended up increasing tuition 3.5%. We're hopeful if we can get the $45 million grant that we could hold the increase below that. If we are at zero, we may well end up higher than that.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you also, the University of Minnesota also gets $100 million for research and various different things. It's like 3 pages of spreadsheet of data. So you also, yes, you get $1 billion from other entities, but you still get another $100 million. So 10% of that is from the state in different research money that comes from different, not this committee, but other committees and other budgets. And so the question I have, though, is as I'm looking again at these employee numbers, has there, just like Min-State is also in the room, and I see a couple of Min-State people, they have talked about right-sizing and making sure that they are nimble and able to respond to students' kind of student-driven needs and things like that. So is there a talk about right-sizing the university to kind of live within the means that you have? And just curious if that's even a conversation.
President Ettinger.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pawlowski. Thank you, Representative Rarick. We're definitely part of what Chancellor Erickson's going to chat with you about here in a couple of minutes is the notion that we know the enrollment trends, for example, on our greater Minnesota campuses have been down. And so our mission, our goal is we need to provide a top quality experience for the students who are there. The Duluth campus, for example, right now is at about 9,500 students. Once upon a time, it was at 13,000 students. If you're one of the 9,500 students there today, it really doesn't make any difference that it used to be 13,000. We owe you the best experience possible now, and we owe a campus that is correctly sized in terms of staffing, in terms of support, to support the level of students that we realistically have. So yes, we are working on that. I think when our Vice President Julie Tonneson gets here and is able to provide some more details on the budget, she may be able to talk more specifically about some of the charts that you're talking about.
Representative Rarick, I would request that you provide the information that you have with President Ettinger, and also provide it with the committee, because we don't have it in our packets either. And then we'll have the university back so that they can answer your questions in specificity once he has the information and we have the information.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you. I would gladly do that. All of that data came straight off of their website, and I will absolutely provide that.
Representative Rarick, I'm familiar with higher education websites, and like the internet, they're endless. So if you
Yes,
could
sir.
provide us and the president with that information, and then we'll have a specific answer for you, I'm sure, in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Coulter.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to make sure we get to the meat of the actual discussion today. Thank you for being here, and thank you all for being here and for validating my theory that one of the reasons to get into the upper echelons of higher education is a wide selection of clothing in school colors. I did just want to ask a very quick sort of clarification question, because sometimes language is imprecise. You said that the Board of Regents hopes to select a new president at their meeting next Monday. Does that mean this coming Monday? Is the next Monday on the calendar?
That's correct.
Okay, okay, thank you. That, I just wanted to clarify as opposed to next, what some of us would call next Monday. Thank you.
A lot of things happening next week. President Ettinger, you then wanted to have is it Chancellor Erickson? No, you wanted to have the student come up first, I think.
That would be, with your permission, Chair Pawlowski, we would
Absolutely.
like that right now. So I would invite up University of Minnesota Duluth student Julia Covert.
All right. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
My name is Julia Covert. I am the Legislative Relations Director for U of M Duluth Student Government Association. I could not be more excited to be here. I'm a sophomore, and my job in the Student Government Association, I represent nearly 8,000 bright, driven, and dedicated students. And today I'm here to speak in support of our 2024 state capital request. Attending school at UMD was undoubtedly one of the best decisions I've ever made. It allowed me to take my passion for government and politics and run with it. The opportunities I've been provided, the groups I've been a part of, and the education I received is priceless. But my favorite thing about UMD is its campus, not just the buildings, but the communities that flourish within them. Heller Hall and the Humanities Building are home to most of our environmental and social science classes and see thousands of students daily, but they haven't been renovated in over 6 years, and that 60 years, and that shows through their outdated classrooms, insufficient lab space, and poor air ventilation. The capital request would allocate funds to update these learning spaces, which would not only improve the lives of the students who utilize them, but will save the university money on more expensive emergency repairs. Students deserve a safe, comfortable, and accessible place to learn and grow. We are Minnesota's future. Please invest in us. Thank you.
Any questions, members? Thank you very much. And next, President Ettinger.
Yes, if I could invite up University of Minnesota Morris Chancellor Janet Shrunk Erickson.
Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chair Pulaski, members of the committee. I'm Janet Erickson. I'm the Chancellor at the University of Minnesota Morris, and I am really grateful for the opportunity to talk briefly about the impact that the University of Minnesota Morris has on our students' lives, on West Central Minnesota, and well beyond our region. The University of Minnesota Morris is an undergraduate-focused residential liberal arts institution that provides a rigorous academic experience preparing students to be global citizens who value and pursue intellectual growth, civic engagement, intercultural competence, and environmental stewardship. At Morris, we value accessible public education and accountability to our community. Across the 5 campuses of the University of Minnesota, 7 out of 10 students come from Minnesota. At Morris, Native American or Indigenous students make up about 30% of the student body this year. These students also graduate at higher rates than the national average for Native Americans at 4-year colleges. Over 80% of Morris seniors have participated in co-curricular activities outside the classroom, and over 70% have completed an internship or field experience. And these are key elements of a Morris experience. The satisfaction rate of our graduates is very high. At the Morris campus, like many higher education institutions across the nation, as well as in this state, we have faced enrollment challenges, although our incoming classes have been about the same size this year and last year. And we are on track, I think, for next year. We are excited about the possibilities in some of our current strategic enrollment strategies, including more partnerships and pathways across and beyond the University of Minnesota system. We can be vital and fiscally sustainable at our current size, though it will take us a while to get there. As we continue to reduce expenses, we are simultaneously investing in ways that respond to the interests and needs of students and families. Tuition at the Morris campus increased by 1% this year, and 41% of Morris students graduate with no debt at all. Morris increases students' access to the kinds of experiences that we know employers value, benefits that should not, we believe, be reserved for those at private liberal arts colleges or those who can afford them on their own. At UMM, we have always put students first. I came in this morning and the person in the information office said, "Oh, you're from Morris. I'm an alum." I love that we pop up and people are proud of that. We have recently launched, in the last week, one more way of putting our students first. The Morris Degree in 3 programs provide a flexible, affordable option for students, especially those who have taken advantage of the state's robust college in the schools or post-secondary education enrollment options. More than 20% of our entering class this year began with more than a semester or more of college credit. And now every student can finish in 3 years if they want to. More than 50% of UMM students come in as science and math majors, and our dedication to and reputation in sustainability is a key part of that. The Morris campus fuels innovation and connections throughout the region and state, including leadership in sustainability, inclusion, partnership, and workforce development. Chair Pulaski and other committee members, thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to President Ettinger.
Chancellor, I have a question for
Yes.
you. I'm looking at page 2 of the supplemental request, the 10-year breakdown on enrollment, and I'm looking at Morris's numbers, which
Yep.
are by far the worst of the lot. Can you respond to the fact that you're down 46.3% in enrollment over that time period?
I can indeed. We spend a lot of time thinking about that, Chair Pulaski. Thank you for the question. There are a couple of ways to respond to that. There's the national landscape, which we are reflecting. There's the fact that 10 years ago in that graph, we were at an unusually high point. If you stretch it out farther, you will see that the graph looks more up and down over time. So we have been low. We have not been as low as we currently are, but we have been low, much lower than we were 10 years ago. So if you go back beyond that 10-year part. An additional factor is that before the pandemic, we had over 200 international students. We have many fewer, around 30 right now. So there are a number of factors that have played into that decline, and we are tackling it head on by reducing expenses as we try, as I indicated, try to respond in new ways to get people to recognize the value of spending 3 or 4 years in another part of the state, in rural Minnesota, in places where people can, more than 50% of our student body comes from the Twin Cities metro area, and we think it's important for them to have an outstate experience.
Chancellor, how long have you been the chancellor at Morris?
I became the chancellor officially last May, but I've been at the University of Minnesota Morris for 25 years.
Chancellor, we're extremely concerned about the declining enrollment and how all higher ed is handling it. And this campus in particular, because when we get into the higher education asset preservation, there are significant issues with the asset preservation at Morris too. So hopefully you'll stay through the whole hearing and there may be questions to that. Representative McDonald.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Ms. Erickson, I was speaking to a person at the Minnesota soybean event the other night. She's a farmer, a family farmer out in Morris, and very active in the soybean community and that organization. And a very successful farmer out in Morris. And she was stating to me, and I see you get your response, that Morris doesn't often offer any degrees that even pertain to agriculture. And of course, the U of M has a history of being an agriculture, and the state does, as well as the U, agriculture kind of state and universities. But her own daughter wasn't able to attend the university, and they live out there and farm out there because of the lack of degrees that they can get from the University of Morris. So that's just hearsay, of course, but a pretty good source, I would have to say, and stand up for that. But just wanted to get your response to that. Is there some truth to that? Is there a reason? Is it deliberate? Is it a failed opportunity? Or what say you?
Thank you for
Chancellor
the.
Erickson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Pulaski and Representative McDonald. Thank you for the question. Actually, it's something that we have been trying to elevate a response to because we don't actually believe that's true. First off, the University of Minnesota Crookston offers a great agricultural degree. So within the University of Minnesota, they can go if they want a straight agricultural degree. But if you talk to, or if you look at any of the people who are currently farmers who know us well, they will say that an ag degree is not really the only way into agriculture. We have former students who work at the Soils Lab in Morris. We have former students who are farmers. We have former students who work at the West Central Research and Outreach Center with whom we partner regularly. We have students who major in environmental science. We have an excellent program there in environmental studies who go into from a number of ag fields from management, from economics, from biology. We do our best to place students in internships locally so that they can see their paths into the kinds of agricultural businesses. We have the lawyer for Riverview Dairy, which is a massive operation by us, is a Morris alum, as is a number of the people who work for Riverview. So we have evidence to counter that, and at the same time, I think we have opportunities. We are exploring other ways without trying to compete with the things that are offered in the St. Paul campus or elsewhere. I think we can partner better across the system, and we are doing so. So we're looking at ways that we can elevate pathways from the Morris campus to programs that more directly address or provide opportunities. We have already the VetFast program, which is popular with students who can come and start at Morris and complete a degree in veterinary medicine on the Twin Cities campus.
Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you for that information. I think that's very important. I think with 41% of your students graduate in 3 years with no debt, and the fact that there must be more opportunities in that industry, you may be going to get the word out because, of course, the decline in enrollment would suggest otherwise. But I think that's important, and you, as you continue to ask for more funding and build your programs, that some prominent members in your community might want to hear that and get that word out.
Thank you.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I actually had the opportunity as a high school student to go to the University of Minnesota Morris campus to study DNA. Now, I'm old, so that was like at the beginning of the DNA study. It was very interesting. And I'm pretty sure you don't do that anymore. So I was from a very rural part of Minnesota, Clearwater County. Do you do that? You still do that? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Chancellor Erickson.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Verrick, we have something new called the Morris Challenge, which brings students to campus in the summer to address all sorts of things like, new food shortage. They do projects and study with experts,
Very good.
high school students.
Representative Rarick, is that it?
No,
Okay, Representative.
sorry. Of course not, Mr. Chair. But thank you. I'm glad you're still doing that because that might actually help. I didn't end up going there. I went to Bemidji State, but there's a whole long reason why that happened, which we won't go into. So I'm wondering if you happen to know what your three things, like your acceptance rate. So the overall acceptance rate of the University of Minnesota system-wide is 75%, and that was an increase over the previous years. It was much lower than that in past years. So if you happen to know what your acceptance rate is, your job placement rate, the overall job placement rate for the entire system is 67%. So, but when you couple that with the graduation rate of the entire system, which is only 64% for the 4-year graduation, some more graduate in 6 years, the prospect doesn't look really great as someone that's starting, at a system where only 67% graduate, and then of them, only 67% actually get a job in their field of study. So I'm wondering if you happen to have that information specific to the Morris campus, since you are such a much smaller campus. It's a little over 1,000 students compared to, out of the 68,000, you're 1,000. So I'm wondering if you've got better overall rates. I'm trying to give you a chance here to shine, Morris, if you could.
Chancellor Erickson.
Chair, thank you. And thank you for the question, Representative Verrick. I don't have the exact ones because we're right in the middle of changing things in terms of what we're doing in admissions. We have traditionally accepted about 60% of applicants, and we are looking now at persistence that fell, as I think, as a result of pandemic remote education. There are persistence problems across the nation. So we are reevaluating our admissions right now, trying to make sure that we're really carefully picking students who can succeed. We are doing what we can to support them, and we want them to succeed. And in terms of placement rate, it's very difficult to get at. We say that we have over about 95% of our students, but that includes students who choose to go to graduate and professional school. And about a third of our students go on to graduate or professional school, something that we think is super important given the demographic we serve. We have the McNair Scholars Program, which really is focused on assisting students from low income or traditionally underserved populations. So we're super excited about those. And other students tend to take a gap year and go do things. So it's really a hard number to pin down. But again, our satisfaction rate that students have is very high. And so the statistics are challenging and not as clear as I think they, I would say, what we say is it's over 90% within a year.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's it. Representative Rarick, I'd appreciate in advance that if you're going to ask questions, which we do not have in our packets, that either you meet with the presenters prior to the hearing so that they're aware of what you're going to ask, or you submit that data to me, because I do meet with everyone prior to these hearings so that they know where the committee's going to go. It's a little unfair to ask questions for which they have no preparation for. Thank you. Next on the list is Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Madam Chancellor, thank you so much for the work that you do over at the University of Minnesota Morris. It's very clear that what you're doing is working and is something that our state needs to continue to support. You mentioned the high graduate satisfaction, the high number of graduates who graduate with no debt, the degree in 3. What an incredible opportunity. There's clearly good things happening at your campus. But I want to follow up on what Chair Pulaski had said and express the concern that I think we all have looking on page 2 of the packet there, that 46.3% decline in enrollment over the last 10 years. Clearly, our state needs to do more to invest in the work that you are doing and all the positive outcomes that you're having on your campus. So I wanted to ask for some more clarification, further detail on what can we do as a committee, as a legislature, to help you turn that enrollment number around? And specifically, what would it mean for you if we were able, for your campus specifically, if we were able to fully fund the supplemental budget request? What would it mean for your campus and its enrollment if we were able to fully fund that HEPA request?
Chancellor Erickson.
Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative Wolgamott. There are so many things that I could say in terms of what it would do for us. I think our biggest challenge is, and we have many in terms of visibility, and there is, as you might be aware, there is a reluctance to venture into the rural parts of the state, into rural locations nationwide. There are some who, if you're there, fine, but if you look at the high school size, the high school class graduating class sizes, they're shrinking. We cannot only draw from our region. We've jokingly said we could get all of the graduates of Traverse County and it wouldn't solve our enrollment problems because that's a very small number in an adjacent county. But funding us is important. We can be vital and be small. We want to be intentionally small. We simply need to reach that place where we've reduced our expenses, whether it's on salary or SE&E, and to match the number of students we have. And that is not out of reach by any means. We have a map to it. We can do that. In terms of funding, though, it gives us the flexibility to do new things, to meet more students where they stand, to make sure that we are the affordable option. And I think the most wonderful thing about the University of Minnesota Morris is the idea that we are an alternative to all those wonderful but expensive private liberal arts colleges across the state. That's why the people who started the campus there did so, because it needed to be where it was, and where we are matters, and we are well aware of that. As far as HEPA, the main building, many of our buildings lack accessibility. We have buildings that faculty cannot get into and students cannot get into if they have any kind of mobility impairments. And those are the kinds of things we need. Our buildings are on the historic register. The main one that we need help with now houses the Multi-Ethnic Resource Center, but it is the oldest building on campus. It dates from the period when the site was an American Indian boarding school. It is the only building that survives from that period at the end of the 19th century. It has its original windows. It has its original insulation. It has its original accessibility for the most part. There is no way for people to get upstairs except by the stairs. And it has steam heat, which is loud and inefficient. So that is what HEPA would help us do.
Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you for that informative answer, Madam Chancellor. And I have one follow-up question to what you said. You mentioned that you want to be a smaller institution and give students that more kind of small size, intimate experience. And you talked about your efforts to strive to reach that sweet spot, right, where your expenses match with the level of having that smaller, more intimate enrollment. Can you just please explain further to us a little bit more insight on how you're striving to find that sweet spot of sort of reducing those expenses to match sort of that small feel while not cutting the things that make UMM such a special place to be? How do you find that sweet spot while reducing expenses but not cutting too much?
Chancellor Erickson.
Chair, thank you, and thank you again for the question. I think we're almost there. One of the things that we have the advantage of is being part of the University of Minnesota system. So it isn't ideal. We don't want to have students take online classes when they're choosing an in-person residential experience, which the majority are. When we offer students an option, 2 sections of the same class, online or in-person fills up way more quickly, hands down. Way more. So the students we're serving want that experience. But across the University of Minnesota system, if the Duluth campus is offering a class that we need, that helps us operate with fewer faculty. We currently offer an accounting minor, not on our own campus. We don't offer enough accounting classes, but through Crookston. We are able to set up experiences by leveraging our system identity, and that's going to help us continue to offer a robust local experience, even as we draw down in our expenses on faculty and instructional staff. My hope is that we grow a little bit more in enrollment and reach a sweet spot there, and then we don't have to reduce any further in faculty. And I think our faculty are really interested in thinking about, we already have a number of interdisciplinary majors. We know from research that what employers want has less to do with what a student majors in than what kind of experience a student has. And that's what we are highlighting. Leadership experiences, communication, collaboration, the ability to work independently. Those are the things that they want, and we can give them that regardless of what they major in.
Representative Wilgons.
Well, thank you, Madam Chancellor, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. First, in case I don't get to speak again, I want to thank you, President Ettinger, for your leadership during this interim role. I think you've done a fantastic job, and it has been a pleasure to work with you. So we're very grateful for all you've done during this time for the university.
Well, thank you very much. I do want to confirm that my understanding is I'll still be in the position through the legislative session, so you may see me again.
Awesome. Well, I don't take it back, but I will offer my sentiments again at a later date. And Chancellor, and maybe this is also for the president, I don't know, because I don't want to put every single person on the spot, but I would like to get the numbers either now or in the future. Given that you're serving 1,020 students, do you know off the top of your head how many employees you have? Because I'd like to see that ratio of employees to students, and perhaps someone could just provide me that for all the campuses. If we could just get, in addition to this chart with the employee numbers sent over, that would be fantastic.
We will do that, Chair Pawlowski and Representative Robbins.
And President Ettinger, it is refreshing to have the president of the University of Minnesota here for an entire legislative session, as opposed to what happened last legislative session. So we do appreciate you being here and also staying with us for an entire hearing. It's greatly appreciated.
We appreciate you
Representative
focusing a hearing on the university. Thank you.
Representative Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Madam Chancellor, thank you for being with us, and thanks for the great work that you do. I've often called Morris the unknown gem. I'm a strong supporter of the liberal arts, so I appreciate what you do. One of the things that I've always wondered about, and if this exists, I would love to know about that too, is, we have so many students who apply to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And they have to be waitlisted at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities because we don't have enough slots there. And because you are able to fulfill those early liberal arts credits that many of our students have, or our students coming out of AP classes to be able to have those classes transfer to Morris, right? Is there any kind of cooperative program between the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and Morris to help those students get their early years maybe at Morris and then either stay at Morris or move on, transfer back to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities at a later time?
Chancellor Erickson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative. There's not a specific program to do that. There is a lot of opportunity to do that, and with the pathways that we've been developing, we have already, you can do it, for instance, you can apply to a Master's in Applied Economics when you apply to Morris. You can apply to the Doctor in Pharmacy program when you apply to Morris, and then transfer to the Twin Cities campus to do that. But we also have multi-I, so students who start, for instance, at the Morris campus and want to do engineering. We don't offer an engineering degree. We give them two options. You can do physics or math and then be prepared to go into engineering, or you can transfer, say, to the Duluth campus quite easily to move forward that way. And we do get, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities does share its wait lists up to a point with the other campuses, with the Duluth, Morris, Rochester, and Crookston campuses. So there, even on that early end, there is some sharing of the applications. We tend to, we would like more of their wait list at times, I think, than they're willing to part with, because they have to make their class too. But I think there is definitely more interest in that kind of cooperation, and I think opportunity.
Representative Cleveland.
Mr. Chair, and this is just really more of a statement, but living in a family with 3 individuals who are heavily involved in agriculture, I know that agriculture today is not defined wholly as agriculture of yesteryear. I mean, it's changed dramatically since my husband got his PhD at CFANS. But those early classes that could be attributed to agriculture are clearly on your campus, and I just want to recognize that and say thank you for the great work that you do in serving the agricultural community. Thank you.
Representative Brer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. So you had mentioned about maybe have to reduce faculty. And when I looked at, again, the numbers just off of the website, the employee counts by job code, and it's faculty and staff, all the head counts. So I found it interesting because one would think that there was a large portion of the total employees that were faculty. That was what I thought I would see. And in fact, it's actually out of 27,000, almost 28,000 employees, only 4,800 are actually faculty. And so when you said talking about reducing faculty, that's a small portion of the whole. And I'm wondering, have you looked at the other job categories like professional, administrative, civil service, labor, professionals and training, and I think those are actually students themselves, but some of the other categories too, because the faculty actually make up a pretty small percentage of the whole.
Chancellor Erickson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Representative Rarick. The numbers you were citing are for the entire system, not the Morris. We don't have that many faculty on the Morris campus. We reduced staff first, and primarily, not necessarily because we wanted to, but education is the core part of our mission, and we wanted to make sure that we preserved direct mission support as long as we could. Moreover, most of our faculty are tenure-line faculty, and so our flexibility is limited, and I think that's fine because when they're tenured, they are much more devoted to working individually with students and to program development, to doing the kind of intensive collaboration with students that you really only get when you invest in the employee. And tenure is one way to invest in the employee. So we have substantially reduced our staff across the board in all areas, and faculty is the last area left where there's much give. And even there isn't a lot of give, but there is enough. We have some areas that are continuing to be under stress. We added recently a line in computer science to meet demand. And at the same time, we will reduce through attrition other areas that are oversupplied for the number of students who are taking those courses.
Representative Brer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would just thank you for that. And you had said faculty, and I thought that doesn't make sense to me as I'm going through all the numbers in my head, like that doesn't really make sense. So I'm glad you clarified that. And I would point out again through the whole system is at a record high since 2016. That's where the numbers I have of total employees for the whole system is 27,675 according to your own website. So I don't see a reduction, probably where you are, yes, but in the whole system, I don't see a reduction. I actually see an increase. Specifically after the pandemic too. So I just
Chancellor Erickson, if you're not ready to respond, that's fine. We can do.
I just want to, can I,
Chancellor.
Chair, make one quick comment in response? I will say that on our campus, and I think this is a microcosm of of all higher education, that even as student numbers have fallen, the need for student support has risen. And students want more mental health resources. Students want more tutoring resources. Students want all sorts of support and need support in order to be successful. Whether that's the result of what happened during the pandemic or something larger, we can't tell. But I think that is one thing to keep in mind. I know our disability office, one person, his workload has risen despite the fact that our enrollment has fallen. Thank you.
Chancellor Erickson, thank you for being here today, and I want to thank the University of Minnesota for selecting Chancellor Erickson, someone who has had not only decades of experience within the University of Minnesota system, but with the University of Morris. I hope this trend continues. I think one way to turn around what's happened to higher education is to begin to groom people from Minnesota inside these systems so that they know what the problems are and they can address them. We're looking forward to working with you in the future, Chancellor.
Thank you.
President Ettinger, what's next?
With the chair's permission, I would like to invite up Vice President Julie Tonneson to discuss our supplemental budget request and provide the committee with additional information.
Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Julie Tonneson. I am the Vice President and Budget Director for the University of Minnesota. Today, my task is to provide information on the supplemental request, but I will first take some time to do a bit of a budget overview at the request of the committee. I'll walk you through a series of slides that will provide some context really for the request. It's not a really deep dive, so we'll provide some overarching information that might help clarify some of the previous conversations a little bit, but not get into too many of the weeds, if that's okay at this point. So I'll talk about briefly, a little bit on our total budget, some updated tuition and enrollment information, again, to supplement what the robust conversation you just had, a little bit on our FY24 budget allocation, given the appropriations we received this year, and then end with a summary of our request, our supplemental request. So to focus the conversation today, we'll be talking primarily about the university's budget for the state O&M appropriation and tuition combined. Much like the state's general fund, these are the discretionary dollars we can use to support mission work directly, but also to pay for the overhead and the infrastructure that's necessary to allow the faculty to teach and do research, and for many of our functions to conduct outreach across the state. The university's total budget, all funds, includes about 34% that is heavily restricted by the source. That is the black and the gray on this chart. Those funds are directed by the source to a stated purpose and cannot be used for anything else. The budget also includes our auxiliary businesses in the dark blue, like the bookstore and parking and student dining, enterprises that are managed to be self-sufficient operations through their rates. And it includes some other technically unrestricted funds at the campus or the Twin Cities College level that are generated by specific activities and are used to support those activities. Think about art courses that have fees for the materials, or the charges for veterinary care at the small animal clinic on the St. Paul campus, for example. Those are in the red piece of the pie. You can think about those funds outside of the maroon and gold as special revenue funds at the state level. They're part of our budget. They are monitored, projected, managed, but the budget process focuses a great deal on the 38% in maroon and gold, which again, you can think of as our general fund. The only way these two sources grow right now, realistically, is through decisions made by our Board of Regents to increase the tuition rates, or through decisions you make at the state level to increase our appropriation, and that's why we're here today. Your approval of our O&M appropriation each biennium is absolutely critical to making this whole pie work. Of the state appropriation and tuition combined on that previous chart, 40% comes from the state appropriation and 60% is projected to come then from tuition. So we wanted to share some trends and up-to-date information about that important tuition revenue source. First, in total enrollment, and you have referenced this chart already today, but it does show all levels, graduate, undergraduate, and professional, plus all non-degree registrations, which is people taking a course but not admitted and enrolled into a degree program. I want to take your attention to the bottom, or near the bottom, and I want to mention that the 7.3% change for the Twin Cities campus over this time is driven by a reporting change related to college in the schools registrations, which started actually in 2022-23. Without that reporting change, total enrollment on the Twin Cities campus is relatively flat in 23-24 compared to 14-15. It's up only closer to 1%. Rochester's trajectory is up and has been close to plans along the way until this year. The drop last fall is largely attributable to unplanned and unfortunate staffing issues that negatively impacted their recruitment plan, particularly in the Twin Cities metro area. The changes you see for Crookston, Duluth, and Morris, as we've been discussing, are consistent with what is happening more broadly across the country to small and medium-sized regional campuses, particularly in the Midwest, with that drop in the numbers of high school graduates. We've been making adjustments and changes across this time frame on all of those campuses in addition to Morris. Decisions have been made along the way to help adjust the budget for this changing situation, arriving at that right size as were discussing earlier today, is something that the chancellors at Crookston, Duluth, and Morris in particular are wrestling with, and we will continue to work with them on that. In most years, our projected tuition revenue for the budget turns out to be less than 1% off from what we actually receive. Last year, based on spring term registrations, our estimated tuition revenues were coming in $24 million below budget, which led to our adjusted biennial appropriation request last session that you may remember. That large of a variance was very unusual and driven primarily by an unanticipated drop in retention rates across the system. Our estimating processes frankly failed us last year, so this year we have instituted a change in those processes. We are now estimating current year revenues more often, and we are beginning earlier in the year with the first look and estimates based on fall registrations. Those initial estimates this last October indicated a great improvement over FY23, with a projected shortfall compared to budget across the whole system of roughly $7 million, or 0.7%, well within the range of what happens in any given year. However, we recently completed an update of those estimates based on spring registrations, and that's what you see reflected here for this fiscal year. While we're still projecting a negative variance compared to budget, overall, things have improved even further. We are working with each system campus and each college on the Twin Cities campus to understand these variances and to adjust their budgets now as necessary. Adjust their spending primarily, so that for those with shortfalls, we don't have to play catch up in the FY25 budget. Not every college is seeing a negative result here. Some are positive. And we are definitely on the right track for the Twin Cities campus. Our retention has improved, and we have done a better job of estimating. As you can see, we are almost exactly right on budget. Crookston's budget for this year is in a good place as they look to be experiencing potential revenues above what they planned. Again, enrollment is better than planned, and they did a better job of estimating. Rochester's facing what is believed to be a one-time shortfall that will be addressed through reserves. For Duluth and Morris, the variances continue to be in the wrong direction and continue to create budget challenges for us. We've already begun to work with them on verifying these estimates and developing actions to lower those costs in real time where possible. At the same time, we are moving forward on two fronts to strategically plan for operating with lower enrollments in the past at Crookston, Duluth, and Morris, as you discussed. First, we're working to maintain and even increase enrollment where we can, perhaps not back to what it once was, but in a stronger position than they are today. And then secondly, they're continuing to right-size their budgets, as again you discussed, to better fit the expected enrollments. This has been happening over time and on each campus. There's a renewed focus now on making some really tough decisions in some places to move forward with reduced costs. So things are moving. We will continue to help them stay on track and make necessary adjustments as we go forward. While on the topic of tuition enrollment, we also wanted to share some early information about the North Star Promise program that you enacted last session. This is an exciting new component of the financial aid landscape that we believe and hope will have a very positive impact in the state. First, based on student numbers and characteristics from 2022-23, we anticipate that the state contribution to our students eligible for the program will be close to $14 million. That will be spread differently across two income groups. For those from families with incomes below $50,000, so the bar on the left, the majority of their tuition and fees total, 74%, will be covered by the traditional combined sources of Pell, the state grant program, and a variety of private and university scholarships. And the remaining 26% will be covered first by the university's existing Promise Plus program. That's the 21% that guarantees tuition coverage for students from families with incomes up to $50,000. And then with the final 5% related to fees covered by the new state program. Because the state program now extends the tuition and fee guarantees to students from families with incomes up to $80,000, the impact of the North Star Promise program is greater for this group of students at the university, with 65% of the guarantee expected to come again from the traditional Pell, MSG, and other scholarships, 15% from the university's Promise program, which provides aid on a sliding scale to students from families with incomes up to $120,000, and then 21% would come from the new North Star program. By campus, the expected numbers of students benefiting
Vice
from the
President
program.
Thompson, I
Yeah,
think Representative Scott has a question. It may
Oh.
have dealt with.
certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know that they're not prepared with this information, but, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, do we have like a historical last 20 years of breakdown of how tuition is paid across the university system, and MNSCU for that matter? How much of that tuition dollars are paid through Pell Grants? How much through the state grant program and those sorts of assistance? How much is taken out in school loans? Kind of a historical look. Do you know of any such document?
I don't have a document at this point, but I think the Office of Higher Ed would be the source probably for
Okay.
that. And they would then go to the systems for the information. So we'll get it for you.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Chair Pulaski,
Representative Cleburne.
if we're going to do a chart like that, I would also like to pair that with the requests that the university has made and the legislative funding of that, so that we have the whole picture, not
right.
just what the university has done, but what we've done as well.
Yeah, and this may take a little time to get, but we'll have the Office of Higher Ed work with the systems, and we'll get that for you. Vice President Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, by campus, what you see on this chart is the expected numbers of students benefiting from the North Star Promise program and the expected costs. Overall, again, based on data from our last completed year, we anticipate roughly 8,700 students could be eligible to receive aid through this program, and I know our folks are working with the Office of Higher Education to refine all of these estimates at this point. But it also shows here the dollars to cover the tuition and fees guarantee corresponding to the coverage represented on the bar chart on the previous slide. They're estimated at an investment of about $89 million from Pell, MSG, and scholarships, an additional $23 million from the university-funded Promise program for this population, and roughly $13 to $14 million from the new state North Star Promise program. In future years, the actual costs will depend on a number of factors, including enrollments of students eligible for the program, and changes to tuition and fees or federal, state, and private financial aid programs. We're all hopeful that this program will have a positive impact on enrollments, and we eagerly anticipate the results. Shifting over now to the state O&M appropriation portion of our revenues, we thought it might be helpful to provide information on how the additional funding appropriated for FY24 has been incorporated into our budget for this year. First, a reminder on the increased appropriations we received. For FY24, we requested two items that were in support of our core mission and our estimated core cost increases for the year. $45 million to help address roughly half of what we anticipated at the time would be a $90 million increase in cost, and $24 million to offset the tuition revenue variance in FY23 that was a recurring reduction in our revenue base available to cover recurring costs. The $50 million increase we received, which, as I referenced earlier, can be thought of as an increase to our general fund, went a long way toward addressing that total $69 million request for core support. In addition, we received $1 million toward our $5 million request for ongoing safety and security needs, funds which were immediately put to use for end-of-life equipment replacement cycles and for additional police and security officers across the system. Just over $4 million was provided as an annual transfer from the Office of Higher Education to support the new impactful financial aid program for eligible American Indian students on all of our campuses. And finally, we received two additions to our recurring appropriations for unemployment insurance aid and menstrual products for all of our campuses that we greatly appreciate as state priorities. On the right side of the chart in red, you can see that we also requested an incremental increase in the recurring appropriation for FY25 of $45 million, again for core mission support, and the final bill did not provide any recurring increase for that second year of the biennium. Before I move on, I do want to also acknowledge that this chart does not reflect the non-recurring appropriations we also received, totaling just $16.6 million in FY24 and $6 million in FY25. Some of that in FY24 was to supplement the two recurring state priorities I mentioned for insurance and menstrual products. $8 million over the biennium was for further security equipment, like cameras, card access readers, blue light kiosks, radio infrastructure, and so forth. $10 million was for the medical school Centricare campus in St. Cloud, and $4 million across the biennium was for programming at NRRI on the Duluth campus. These are extremely important items of support for the university. They're not included on this particular table because they are not recurring addition to our base, so they have no bearing on our ability to cover our projected recurring cost increases moving into FY '25 and
Vice
beyond.
President Tonneson, I think Representative Wogemont has a question.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Vice President. I would like to go back just a few slides. We really appreciate the very informative chart on the first slide of this tuition section that outlines the 10-year history of the fall semester official count. And I notice, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice President, in looking at this chart, each of the Greater Minnesota non-Twin Cities campuses has experienced a double-digit decline in enrollment over the past 10 years, with one exception. There's an outlier there. Rochester enrollment has actually increased by 20.5%. And Madam Vice President, I was wondering if you could, or maybe also you, Mr. President, provide some more context on that. What's working at Rochester? Why are we seeing, double-digit declines in enrollment at the other outstate campuses, but a double-digit increase at Rochester? What's making that difference? And are there any lessons that can be learned from the positive growth that we're seeing in Rochester that can be applied to the other campuses, other outstate campuses?
President Ettinger, I think that's to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Wogemont. I would cite maybe two major areas. First of all, the University of Minnesota Rochester is a relatively new campus. Indeed, it's one of the few campuses in the United States that's been started new in the past 20 years. One of my first events as interim president was to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the first graduating class. So we're in our 14th, 15th year down there. So it's kind of enjoying that kind of a trend. Secondly, I think they have a very specific mission. It's very health science oriented, not per se training doctors. We do that on our Duluth campus. We'll do that with our new Centricare partnership. We do that in the Twin Cities. We indeed have had graduates from the University of Minnesota Rochester who have gone on to medical school, but the focus of the program is very health science oriented, integrated in many ways with Mayo. Our campus is right next to it. And so I think that focus has been a benefit.
Thank you.
Representative Wogemont. Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Chair. So also, it's because we're awesome. But, Representative Wogemont, if you would like to come see just how different that campus is, I would welcome you and anyone from the committee for a visit. What the president stated is true, but also it was built from a place of how do we do this better and how do we do this differently and how do we do it more equitably. And it is being highlighted, and I wish our chancellor was able to be here today because it is being highlighted not only for the great increase in enrollment and outcomes, but also for really eliminating disparities around racial lines and gender lines. And I am so proud of them, and I'm so glad that you noticed how amazing they are. So.
Representative Wogemont.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that invitation, Representative Hicks. I would love to take you up on it. Thank you.
Vice President Tonneson, continue.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before moving to the supplemental request for the $45 million, I do want to focus in for just a minute on the large $50 million recurring increase in our state appropriation for FY24 and how that made such a difference in getting to our balanced budget for the year. I need to step back just a bit to briefly explain how we think about the budget for our O&M appropriation and tuition combined. We do incremental budgeting, much like the state does, where there is a base, a balanced budget from the prior year, with planned increases and decreases from that base as we move forward. At the institutional level, we then plan for incremental changes from that base in resources and costs. The state appropriation is one of the resource changes that we need to plan for. And that change, combined with our estimated change in tuition revenue and sometimes from other revenues that we can bring to the table, must cover the anticipated general fund cost increases related to student services, compensation, facility costs, inflation, and other issues, net of any planned spending cuts and reductions. From that original conceptual model for balancing the budget, then, how did the increased $50 million in the O&M appropriation for FY24 fit into the approved budget? This is the high-level math representing the decisions made to balance this year's general fund budget for the university in total. In addition to the $5.5 million for state-designated new appropriations and transfers that I mentioned on a few slides previous, the $50 million O&M increase was combined with some central reserves, but more importantly, it was combined with $39.5 million of increased dependence on growth in some of those other special revenues I mentioned earlier, plus planned internal budget cuts, and an estimated $23.5 million incremental growth in tuition from both enrollment changes in some cases and modest rate increases approved by the board. And the combination of those incremental resource gains were used to pay for the combination of costs identified here. Our 4% general salary increase and the accompanying benefit costs, the actual $23.3 million of tuition revenue shortfall from FY23, as we discussed earlier, a slightly lower than planned but still significant increase in facility and technology licensing costs, and then two categories of ever-changing issues and investments, the list of which can be found in our approved budget, but includes such things as the public safety and security investments, including and beyond those supported by the new designated state dollars, library collections, costs associated with academic program growth in some areas, like a new undergraduate program in the School of Public Health, the budgeted deficits from tuition shortfalls throughout our campuses, but most significantly for our regional campuses, new compliance-focused positions related to biosafety and environmental hazards, and so on. Plus, because we are facing a current law situation in which we get no appropriation increase for FY25, we also plan to hold almost $9 million as uncommitted on the bottom line that will be available to help address what we're anticipating will be a $100 million cost growth potentially for next year. We cut deeper, and we're leveraging growth in our other revenues more than we planned in order to create that balance. As I hope you can see, the incremental new $50 million of core basic support you provided for FY24 was critically important in balancing our budget in a responsible way. We're always planning in a way that allows us to continue and expand on the exciting programs and services we provide to our students and others, and the state funding is a big part of allowing that to happen. Turning to FY25 now, we're facing a very similar set of issues and challenges that we did for this year, which leads to our supplemental budget request to the state that our Board of Regents approved for submission during their October meeting. We understand the implications of the last state revenue forecast and the projected deficit the state is anticipating for the next biennium. It's not unlike the projected picture the university faces for FY25 prior to the necessary decisions to balance that budget. We know we will have cost increases related to compensation, to facilities and technology needs, to inflation, to safety and compliance, and to maintain quality, we'll need to make strategic programmatic and service enhancements. And right now, for the activities funded by the state O&M appropriation and tuition, there is no known or automatic growth in revenues to cover those costs, hence the projected challenge. So while we're all awaiting the next revenue forecast and we understand that funding is likely to be tight, we also believe it is our responsibility to communicate how state funding can make a real difference at the university. Our Board of Regents is respectfully requesting consideration of the same $45 million incremental base appropriation increase for core mission support that we submitted a year ago. Approval of that request would be a 3.3% increase in that biennial base appropriation. This request is about students first and foremost. By supporting the core, we make it possible to continue to provide the world-class instruction students deserve and to provide the academic support services necessary for them to succeed. It will also make it possible to provide the wraparound services to address their safety and security needs and campus life experiences. And it will even make it possible to provide the research and the public engagement activities that result in unique opportunities for students to gain some really valuable experience on our campuses. The core is all about making these things possible, because what these additional funds would pay for, in combination with some tuition revenue gains and continued internal cuts, are those basic spending items listed on the bottom of this slide. Without the technology and the facilities and the physical equipment and supplies, the learning and the research could not happen. And most importantly, without the people, none of what we do is possible. We simply must fairly compensate our employees and work to address many needs of our workforce. The impact of the $45 million would be meaningful. The core services I just summarized must be supported at some level. We can't turn them all off or down. So if the state provides this support, it will allow us to do some major impactful things, just like it did for the current year. I will highlight just a few before turning the table over to questions or our next presenter. First, it will allow us to implement lower tuition rate increases for students than we otherwise would be considering, therefore directly impacting the cost of attendance and working to reduce the dependence on student loans. Second, it will also allow us to better maintain services for students, and maintenance doesn't mean standing still. It means continually evaluating and improving and modifying the programs and services we offer to best fit the students' ever-changing needs. We're doing so many exciting and impactful things around student services and educational opportunities today, and we need to fuel that continuous improvement process. Third, it will allow us to meet more of the demands we have related to our spaces and our physical environment. Our efforts to reduce our physical footprint continue, but we will always have classrooms, libraries, labs, offices, and gathering spaces, and those must be safe, functional, sustainable, and accessible, while being very conducive to excellence in teaching, learning, and research. The operating budget, where this $45 million would apply, helps to provide for the day-to-day care, maintenance, and equipment updates to those spaces. And finally, it will help our efforts to fairly support our faculty and staff. This year, it allowed for a general compensation increase of 4%, which was less than that provided to state employees for both years of this biennium. Supporting our core operating costs and our core mission activities is truly supporting the heart of the university in so many ways. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer questions or move
Vice
on.
President Tonneson, I want to compliment you and President Ettinger. You alluded to it when you did your presentation, but you've made changes in how you're calculating your enrollment, and that has been very helpful in the presentations this session. I know there was some difficulty last session in getting accurate numbers, and the changes that you made have been much appreciated here, so thank both of you for doing that. Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the data and information as well. As you can tell, I'm a data-driven person. Wondering, you had talked about drop in retention, that you've reduced the amount that are leaving. And I'm just wondering, when students leave, is there any kind of exit survey, or do we know why students are leaving? And I know the vast majority of your students, 54,000 plus, are on the Twin Cities campus, and we know that we've given you quite a bit of money for safety and security because we've got crime rampant, and apparently crime actually went up like 23% in your area over last year. But anyway, I was just wondering if you've done an exit strategy or exit survey to find out why people are leaving.
Vice President Tonneson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Rarick, they do try to gather that information. I don't have actual results, survey kind of results, but I do know from speaking with our experts in admissions that they learn from students. There are a wide variety of reasons students leave, and that existed even last year, just at higher levels. So for example, there was the traditional reasons that students leave have to do with family situations, the inability to pay, so financial support drops off in one way or another. It's sometimes it has to do with them finding other employment. When the economy is really good, they choose to work instead. It could be health reasons. It can be also academic preparedness, where they really weren't as prepared for a college experience as they thought. All of those things are not new. And from my understanding, that is what we experienced last year as well, just in larger numbers. But I don't have this, the percents, like so many are in each of those categories.
Representative Rare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm sure you wouldn't. I was just mostly curious if you do some sort of an exit survey and have a sense, and, pandemic was difficult on so many different levels. I appreciate that. It also kind of ties in with your 4-year graduation rate, which is only 64%. That's also, I think, on your website too. But yeah, a lot of folks are leaving, and it's difficult to run a campus when, they start and then don't finish. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to add, my understanding is this year, all of our campuses have seen an increase in the retention rate again this year. So they are working to improve that.
No further questions. President Ettinger, do you wish to sum up? We are not going to go over the capital request today. We simply don't have the time. So we'll invite you back for the capital request. I don't want to take 10 minutes and just get started and then we're done. So we'll keep the capital request for the next hearing. So President Ettinger, you may, I'm sorry, was there Representative Cleaborn?
Chair Pulaski, I would just like to acknowledge all of the regents that are in the room. So it's really great to see them here and maybe welcome them to come more often.
Representative Cleaborn, they do appear at most of the hearings. I'm on the Capital Investment Committee, so I see them there too, and I do appreciate them nodding when there's information that you agree to, so that's also noticed. So I agree with you. It's great having them here, but it's also impressive to have the president here for the entire hearing. That is greatly appreciated. Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I just wanted to begin and say Happy University of Minnesota Day at the Capitol. And I also wanted to take a moment to thank President Ettinger for your work, dedication, and leadership. You came at the right time when we had a lot of things to solve. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for your partnership. We look forward to continue to work with you, and also for the regents who are here and your leadership team. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative McDonald.
Mr. Chair, also I want to send a thank you as well to for you to be here at the committee hearing and for the full time. Certainly not the first time. I appreciate the opportunities and the fact that you're able to answer some tough questions. I think one thing that I and many in the committee have appreciated with the chair is he has asked very good, sometimes tough questions. And what I've observed in the 14 years I've been here, of course they pale in comparison to Representative Chair Pulowski, is the fact that we are able to ask good, tough questions. Representative Rarick is one that does her homework 10 times, 100 times better than I had ever will in my lifetime, and does ask some good questions and backs it up with good data. The fact that she had that data and didn't provide to the testifiers or the committee ahead of time, as the chair suggested, I have not witnessed that in my 14 years here, that some member would be required to provide a question ahead of time to the testifiers and to the committee. That is something I personally haven't witnessed or observed. So, Mr. Chair, I think that that request, just personally, and we're dear friends. Of course, he served with my father for many years. I respect him and admire him 100%. But I think that question or comment to Representative O'Neill, Rarick, was unreasonable, and certainly you don't practice that. You ask good, tough questions, and that's one of the reasons I admire you. Yeah. So I think that was an unfair request to
Representative McDonald,
Rarick.
in the committees I've chaired, that has been the procedure. And I don't like to have witnesses put into a situation where they simply can't answer the question. I agree, we should ask tough questions, and preparation is part of the key. But it's also sharing what you're going to do. So on that point, I would disagree. Representative Hicks.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for being here, all of you. There was a comment made earlier, and it wasn't in a point in time where there was a really good opportunity to highlight it. And so I just wanted to take a moment, because you've said a couple of times around academic preparation and student needs, and the other chancellor talked about the increase of disability service support on campus. And we're going to continue to see that because kids and students with disabilities have access now to college. They know that they can get their accommodations. They understand that when someone says, you have dyslexia, probably can't be a lawyer, that's no longer a thing. They can be a lawyer, and they can do those things, and they will do those things, but they will do them with support. And so we get glossed over sometimes in these spaces, and things are mentioned in passing, and I just wanted to take a moment to sort of highlight that our students with disabilities coming out of our K-12 system and entering into our higher ed system are not a burden. They need support, and we need to support the people who are supporting them. So, thank you.
And seeing no more statements with that, meeting is adjourned.